Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome. This is CMG Talk, and as always, I am your host, Catherine Gallagher. Silence. How does it feel when you have silence around you in your life? Is silence important? I love silence. For me, silence equals peace, calm, tranquility. It can also be uncomfortable, can't it? When I work with my clients and I pause, and I'm waiting for a response, I sit with silence. Giving them time to process, to access. And often there's a reactionary, I don't know. And I'll say, yes, you do. Inviting them to look harder. Look harder. Go inside and look harder. Silence can be a form of what for you? What does it signify for you? Do you feel you need to fill the void? If someone's silent around you, do you feel uncomfortable? Do you feel calmness? When I do couple work, whether it's my result coaching or whether I'm working individually with clients in couple, and I ask them, when you're together as a couple, can you sit comfortably together in silence? No. If we can sit together in a room with a friend, family, a partner, and have silence, it says we're comfortable. Would you agree? I was doing a presentation recently, and this training session, I was talking about a thought-provoking subject. And because I'm quite playful sometimes, well, a lot of the time, I use humour a lot, appropriately, she says, and I was inviting them to take their mic off so they could be interactive. And I could see many, but not all. And there was silence. And sometimes in presentations, as a presenter, you're aware that people are very engaged, and sometimes you get some people that put the camera off and go away and make a cup of tea. Right? So you want to make sure, for me, it's so important, because I love what I do. People tell me it comes across. They say, you're really passionate about what you do. You really enjoy what you do. And I do. I want to serve my clients, right? Whoever attends, whether it's as a coaching client, a therapy client, coming to a training, I want to make sure that you know that I'm on point. I'm here, I'm turning up and showing up, and I want you to do the same, right? So I always say in a training course, turn your mics off. Unless there's hundreds, and then, it's a bit overwhelming if everybody's trying to talk at once. And I always ask, turn your mics off, and if you want to say something, say Catherine, or, introduce yourself so that everybody's not talking over everybody. And at one point, I asked a question and there was silence. And I've said, just checking in. Is there someone still out there? And suddenly you could hear the click, 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 click as the mics went on. And I went, have I lost you? Are you still with me? And they were all laughing. And one came on and said, I was thinking about what you were saying. And I went, And they went, no, seriously, I was thinking about what you were saying. And I said, no, I'm thinking about what you were saying. And we all started then. There was silence. And you could hear this kind of reflection as people were thinking about the topic. And then people really started opening up about their thoughts. Because I set parameters and boundaries about what's said in here stays in here. And the conversation was really flowing and people really engaged. But we also know that if we're sitting with people and there's tension, but there's silence. And sometimes it's a war of silence, isn't there? Who's going to speak first? Who's going to move first? Who's going to break that wall of silence? Silence can help us be creative. Help us reflect and process. Help us decompress and de-stress. Can give us time to make sense of a question or what's happening around us. Can also give us space to ruminate, do unhelpful thinking, if we're not using it constructively, if we're not taking action. Silence can give us space to procrastinate, put off. We fill the void and space in our internal talk, and we're talking about in our voice, our inside talk, and that silence is, I am not confident. I am not worthy. I am. And the minute we say I am, we're identifying ourselves as that person. Silence, though, can be prayerful, reflective, can allow us to be fully present and mindfully present in what we're doing. Have you ever been in a situation where it might be around food, around family, around friends, around people you care about, and there's just this silence, people fall into silence, and you're really enjoying what you're doing, you're fully present, and maybe the silence is broken by laughter or something happening, but there's been silence before that. And people are like, that was such a good night. That was a brilliant night. The silence wasn't seen as anything other than part of the flow and the ebb of the evening. Silence can feel endless and unbroken if there are no voices, if there's no happiness, no engagement, no interactions, if we're lonely, if we're isolated. What does silence mean for you? Is silence something you embrace? You'll notice when I do presentations or when I do podcasting that I pause. And I deliberately pause. I'm not actively thinking about it, but it's a style that I have, and I can be up there with my energy. If I'm on stage and I'm performing, I can be high energy. But when I do podcasting or do trainings online, I don't tend to go, okay, people. That's not really my style. I quite like to make it conversational. And I talk as if I'm talking to you. Because I am actually imagining that we're having a conversation. That's how my style is. And you'll hear me checking in and saying, does that make sense? Are you with me? What do you think? Because that's how conversations ebb and flow. I'll also pause. Someone once said to me, they were listening to a podcast, and they said they quite liked the fact that there was pauses. And I said, I'm happy to hear that. I said, what's that about? And they said, because it allows me to think, to catch up, to process what's been said. If it's too much coming at me and too much stimulation, there's too much information, I'm still trying to make sense and process what's been said. We can be sitting in a room with silence and there's distant noise. I had a conversation not so long ago about meditation, about mindfulness, about prayer, about reflection. And someone said to me, I can't sit in complete silence. My brain doesn't go blank. And I said, there's another name for it when your brain goes blank. I said, when we're alive, we will always have thoughts. That's called being human. When people say, oh, my brain goes completely blank and I can completely... we have thoughts. It's how we manage and handle those. It's acknowledging them and letting them go. But we're always going to have stimulus because we're human. But it's how we manage the ebb and flow. And practice. 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 It's the patience. And with silence, we learn in patience. If we become more aware with silence, that's what we do. We learn patience. We learn awareness. We learn more about ourselves when we sit in silence. If we have too much going on around us and too much stimulus, we lose sight of and we lose out on what's going on in our own sphere because we're too busy looking at everything else out there, whether it's on social media, on the television. If we tune back in and sit where we are and pay attention, we start then really tuning into what's going on around us, within our body, within our mind, our feelings, and our thoughts. You start listening, actively listening and really hearing our conversations we have within us. If you learn to tune in and sit more comfortably in silence. When people say to me, I don't really know the conversations my internal voice has, I'll say, sit in silence. Be comfortable having your own space and become aware of the words and how it makes you feel with the words that you're saying to yourself. When I say this, the feelings that come up are this. Perhaps if I change it more to this, or maybe if I take an action, that might then mean that I might feel more like that. Will that be more helpful for me? What keeps us stuck in a negative emotion is when we ruminate, dwell on, catastrophize, negate all the negative is more helpful rather than getting stuck on all the negatives. But see what we point our brain to. Someone said to me, if I ignore all the negatives, am I being real? I'll say, of course not. We have to acknowledge our feelings, own our feelings, but we don't have to necessarily get stuck with our feelings. It depends on what the feelings are, surely. If you're feeling sad, low, lonely, low moods, depressed, unhappy, you ask yourself, is this how I want it to be? Am I taking actions and doing things that will change my state of mind? Often what we see is what is not working. We often don't look at the things we are grateful for, the things that we are appreciative for. If we sit in silence and truly access and reflect on the things that we have going for us. I was sharing the other day that I practice gratitude in every small way every day. I've practiced that for years. It's not something that I just woke up one day and suddenly became good at. It's something that I've put the effort and energy into doing. I'm grateful for the small things, not necessarily just the big things that might come into my life. If I get parked easily, I'm grateful. If I have a lovely conversation with a cashier in a shopping, time, I'm grateful. That's why sometimes you'll hear me talk about these things in podcasts. I've got a family birthday coming up and it's a special birthday. I know that we have a family meal. I'm going to really be grateful for that time together. Happy birthday to my brother coming up. You'll love me saying this. When we pay attention to the things as we go along, and if we trust in the fact that life will present good things and not just negative things, we grow more from the disappointments and the hurts. But if we negate the things that work well for us, the things that have come to us that have been good experiences, then we're not doing ourselves a good service. Silence gives us opportunities to decompress, remember, to de-stress, to become in tune with your body and your mind, to declutter all the thoughts and feelings that you're having that are unhelpful, to be creative, be productive in working out what you need to do. to recharge and energize, to be still, to switch off, and to have time for you. Sometimes it gives you an opportunity to have silence, to make sense of a conversation. It can also be an opportunity to connect. Of course, sometimes silence can be used as a way of manipulation, holding control, causing anxiety towards another. Sometimes people will say to me, I'm fearful of silence. I've experienced silence as a negative thing. If someone is silent with me, I wonder what next. Understanding the power of silence can free us up. The power to empower us. Have you checked my episode that I dropped just there? Knowing the effectiveness of silence, knowing how silence can be for you. Is silence something that is a positive experience? Can you make it work for you? Is it something that you find triggering? And if so, what can you do about that? Do you want to do something about it? If you think of all the positive things that silence can be, when you're in a secure relationship, silence can actually show you true, deep, meaningful connection. Silence can allow you to process, to make sense, to learn, to grow, to declutter your brain, to be more productive, to energize yourself, to be more mindfully present in what you're planning to do. If you experience silence as a negative thing and you feel the need to constantly be busy, 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 or fill the void, and you're constantly on, switched on, you can run to burnout, overdrive, overstimulation, anxiety, stress. And that can be exceptionally unhelpful for you and for your body. So investing in you and seeing silence as a very powerful and very helpful skill set to have. Thinking about how silence works in your life. Does it work in your life right now, I'm wondering? I started off saying, I love silence. I love coming home and sitting, even for a short period of time, in silence. It allows me to go, and just decompress. Switch off. No stimulation. thinking about how to move forward and having more time and space with silence, and rather seeing it as something that you feel lonely with, embracing it would be a really positive goal to have, I would suggest. So making silence work for us. If you think about people who've had to live in silence, have been forced, whether through captivity, and how silence has worked because they've went within themselves and they've been able to find creativity and amazing ways to be able to live their life in their own world, because our brain has an amazing capacity and capabilities to do so, even though they've been in silence and silenced. And when they talk about the silence that they experienced, they don't talk necessarily about it being about loneliness. They talk about the growth and the personal growth they experience from that silence. Of course, it wasn't always a positive experience, of course not. But they learned to work with silence. And as human beings, it's important that we do have time to decompress, and we do embrace silence in our life. As a society, we're so reliant on technology and stimulation that we often don't take time out, and we don't often see silence as necessary. You know that phrase, silence is golden. There's a reason. There's a reason why that phrase was said. So I wonder if this has given you any pause for thought. I wonder if you're saying, actually, I do have times where I sit on a regular basis. You know, I do reflection or meditation, or I take time out. I give myself time to decompress. I don't have working lunches. I, make sure I prepare at night, and I quite enjoy my time in my space. I like to go out for walks, and I like to have my time with silence, and I'm not uncomfortable with it. Or is it giving you pause for thought, where you're thinking, actually, I'm really uncomfortable with silence and I tend to be the one that fills it? Or do you have really negative experiences around silence? Is that something that you would consider? For me, silence should never be used for power and control. It should be a way we are inviting someone to enter a conversation. It might be where we are giving consideration before we respond. It might be where we are healing or recovering, or we are decompressing, being creative, being in our own mind, decluttering. Whether it's our environment, whether it's within our head. But it should never be a tool used. I believe it should never be a tool used for manipulation or for abuse. And if somebody is using silence where they're withholding from you, how do you deal with that? Do you follow them, pursue them? Or do you invite them to come to you when they're ready? Do you say, it seems this isn't the right time for you? You don't want to have a conversation about this? When you are ready, I'm here. Finding that equilibrium, that power dynamic. Especially if somebody's not ready to talk, pursuing them just makes that distance even further apart. Sometimes people need space. Sometimes people don't want to talk. They're not ready to talk. They need to process things. And we need to respect that silence. But if it's an unhealthy and toxic use of silence, maybe you need to listen to that. So silence, a very important tool, skill set to use, very effective in our life, and be more comfortable with silence is important. So hopefully this has given you something to think about and a way to use this as a very useful tool within your life. Thanks for listening. This is Catherine Gallagher, and this is CMG Talk. Silence is golden.